What is good? YouTube is the video about the Atlanta Hawks, a team that got Dwight Howard, Paul Millsap, and Dennis Schroder and Kent Bazemore, Tim Hardaway Jr. A group full of role players was able to make it to the playoffs, win over 40 games, and all of them had to relearn how to play with each other because the roster went through so many changes the last 3-4 years. And now it has all come to an end because all of them are gone. Paul Millsap, Al Horford, Dwight Howard 1-year rental, and he's already traded. Tim Hardaway Jr. They wanted to see if they can keep him. They let him go. And all you have is Dennis Schroder and Kent Bazemore left. Role players have moved, and now they have to see what's going to go on in Atlanta. But they had to do this because they had to figure out what kind of team are we, what kind of identity is we gonna have. We wasn't a great defensive team, and we wasn't a great offensive team with or without all those players. And on top of that, we had a terrible season because we was up and down. 1 minute they had an amazing record, next minute they wasn't even in the playoffs. Then next thing you know, they was mediocre. They barely made the playoffs because they was able to get off to a decent start and be mediocre through the rest of the season. And that's not really being harsh, it's just reality, because I watched the team this whole year go up and down, up and down, and up and down, and just bottom out enough to make the playoffs. And they had gave the Washington Wizards a fight. They gave the Washington Wizards a challenge, knowing that the Washington Wizards were one of the better teams in the East. So they had potential. Oh, if we add this piece, add that piece, but they would have to overpay Paul Millsap. They already had to pay Dennis Schroder. Then they would have to pay Tim Hardaway Jr., and they already paid Dwight Howard. They would have been stuck in mediocrity with that roster. So they say, hey, we'd keep Bazemore, who they paid. We'd keep Dennis Schroder, who showed that he can be a solid starter and point guard in the league. He's not really showing superstar potential. He's not overly dominant, but he showed that he's a solid starting center in this league, and he's respectable because he was giving John Wall the buckets. He was one of the better defense, probably a top 3 defensive point guard in the league. And he was getting tore up and a little torched by Dennis Schroder. And that was Dennis Schroder first year being a starter. That was Dennis Schroder first year of being in the playoffs as the main point guard. And he played pretty well against one of the more better defensive point guards in the league in John Wall. So I will give him credit for that. But now they're trying to find what they're going to do in general, because they know that they have to pay these players to stay, and they have to pay these players to be on the roster. But they paid Kent Bazemore $16 million, and they paid Dennis Schroder $15 million. Everybody on the roster not paid more than that. So they paid the two best, their two best players getting paid the most money. Their best player is Schroder, but he's getting paid less than Kent Bazemore. But Kent Bazemore is not really a small forward because he's 6'5". He has to be 6'7", 6'8", 6'9", sometimes 6'10" at the small forward position. So he's giving up a lot of size, and he's giving up a lot of athleticism going against other threes if he's going to play the small forward position. But he also can play the 2 position. Since they got rid of Tim Hardaway Jr., they can slide him back to the 2, and he has size at 6'5", 201 to play the 2. Plus he can shoot the ball a little bit. He's a little streaky sometimes, but he can get it done. And they already paid him, and a lot of people don't want to pay Kent Bazemore $16 million a year. He shot respectable 34% from 3, but it wasn't elite. He didn't really knock down that many shots, and with his field goal percentage was at 40, but he only played 26 minutes, and they paid him $16 million to play 26 minutes and be basically a streaky player. That's a lot of money and a lot of investment that didn't really pay off. But they still have Taurean Prince. He can play the small forward position because he's 6'8", 220. He needs to get a little bit more bulkier, but he has the length and the size, and he's a solid player in general, but we don't know how good he's going to be. But he shows some potential that he can be a solid starter in the league if he gets the minutes, if he gets the time, he can be a solid player, and if he can continue to develop. So I like Taurean Prince. I think that's a nice pickup. Miles Plumlee is a guy that's getting paid $12 million a year. He's a solid center at best, but you're paying on $12 million because you can't find nothing better. And he's actually not really overpaid because he showed that he can produce as a starter and being basically a second man, a second center. He's not the starting center, but he can be the next backup center in the league. But he might be starting on this roster. Depends on what they want to do because they got Dwayne Dedman, and he can be he's not as good offensively and as athletic, but Dwayne Dedman is a solid center in the league. And he played for the Spurs, so he knows how to play. He knows how to be coached. He knows how to win, and he gave them valuable minutes when he did play. And the roster still have the stretch fours and Mike Muscala. You still have the shooters and Kent Bazemore, Marco Bellinelli, Taurean Prince, Ersan Ilyasova can be a stretch four too. And you still have the ability to play pace and space because you have these shooters and you have these versatile players that can be stretch fours and stretch threes, and you have length and size at certain positions, but you really don't have no inside presence at all on this roster. You have no rim protection at all to me on this roster besides Dwayne Dedman. And you really don't have no superstar offensive guy that you can get a ball to and let him go to work or carry the offense when it becomes stagnant. Because that's what happened a lot last year with Dwight Howard and Paul Millsap. Sometimes they'd be an unstoppable team offensively like you seen against the Cavs last year. And sometimes they'd be a mediocre offensive team and defensive team when they're just good enough to be in a game, or they lose a game because they can't score consistently. I can see that happen a lot more this year because they don't have the rim protectors. They don't have really outside Prince and Kent Bazemore. They really don't have the wing defenders, even though they might play on the court at the same time. That'd be good. But can they score offensively? Like I said, Kent Bazemore's a little streaky. Taurean Prince, he doesn't really get the minutes. And if he does, he still has to develop, know how to attack, when to attack, what he can do, what he can't do. He got to learn his go-to moves. So he's been a solid player. He's been a boost. But he might be asked to do more this year. And we have yet to see if he can do that. But he has showed that he's a quality player in the league. So they can be a good offensive team because they have the pace and space. And they can pass the ball and move it, even though Dennis Schroder like the ball in his hand. But at the same time, they was mediocre with Paul Millsap, with Dwight Howard, with a better roster in Tim Hardaway Jr., a ball handler and a guy that can create his own shot and knock down threes. And they was barely able to win with that roster. And they was mediocre offensively. And they got stagnated in some games when they couldn't even score at all. And they had a guy like Paul Millsap, Tim Hardaway Jr., and Dwight Howard. So this team can either be a surprise team to me because Coach Budenholzer, he's that good of a coach and he can figure out he knows what his personnel can do. He knows their strengths, he knows their weaknesses, and he can put them in those positions to be good and put them in positions to win games. So I'm not going to question Coach Budenholzer because he proved that he can coach. He proved that he can win games. He's been in the Eastern Conference Finals. So I'm not going to discredit him on that. But at the same time, he just doesn't have the help. He just doesn't have the talent to really make a run with this roster or probably even make the playoffs. But he kind of reminds me of Brad Stevens. When they traded Rajon Rondo, they became more of a pace and space, move the ball around, all the role players knows their strength and their weaknesses, and they end up working out because the Celtics been in the playoffs for the last 3 years. I can see that happening with this team. You have a solid player in Bazemore. You have a solid player in Dennis Schroder where if you play the game the right way and everybody plays to their strengths, you can win games collectively. You might not have a player that average 20 a game. You might not have a dominant, crazy offensive player that can carry the load. But if you move the ball around, people be in the right place at the right time, they be at the three-point line when you kick it. They knock down shots consistently. This offense can move. This offense can generate points if they do it together because they don't have a superstar. But they did it before in Atlanta. when Coach Budenholzer first got there and they was able to win 60 games. But this team has way less talent. This team is basically rebuilding. They really do need draft picks. They really do need to accumulate more draft picks so they can build a team faster through the draft and have more chances to hit and find a superstar, because Atlanta does have problems landing franchise players and landing superstars if it's not with the draft. Because Joe Johnson really wasn't a superstar when they had landed him. He was a guy that wanted to prove himself, and he ended up becoming one of the better players in the league. But he wasn't a superstar when he got signed with the Atlanta Hawks. So they haven't really did signing no real big superstar. They traded for Bibby. They drafted Al Horford. They signed Paul Millsap, but he wasn't a superstar when he was signed by the Atlanta Hawks. They signed Dwight Howard, but he wasn't a superstar either. So they're going to have trouble landing superstars unless they can give them the max contract. And Atlanta is a good place to live. Other than that, they're going to have to rebuild this from the draft and from the bottom all the way back up to the top. And I think they can do it with Coach Budenholzer. And I think that they have the right coach. They have some solid players, and some of the contracts are not terrible, and they're movable. And if they can get more assets and more picks, I can see this turning out to be a good roster. But they haven't been to the finals. They haven't won a championship in years, so we don't know if the organization can do it. So let me know what you guys think about the Atlanta Hawks. Comment, like, subscribe, and share. Check out my video. Oh, I have this team not making the playoffs and probably winning around 28 to 35 games at most. So I have them out of the playoffs. That's what to expect. But check out my website, NoxusPlayground.com. The link will be in the description in the comment section below. All you gotta do is click the link and it sends you to my website. And all you gotta do is check out the website. Also check out my Facebook page, NoxusPlayground.com. The link will be in the description in the comment section below. And there you can find my Facebook page. And all I'm doing is asking you guys to like, to show support. Thank you for watching. Quinn Wade, Basketball Analysis, signing out. And let me know what you think what the Atlanta Hawks should do. Should they trade for a superstar? Should they try to draft an Al Horford or a player that's better than him? Should they tank and try to get the best player, the best draft spot they can get? Or should they just be like, hey, we can eventually somebody like a Paul Millsap, like a Joe Johnson gonna want to come here and play, and maybe they can turn into a superstar, because Paul Millsap wasn't an all-star player until he got to Atlanta. Same with Joe Johnson. So maybe they can find a player like that and end up being like a James Harden, become a superstar, and they made it to the Eastern Conference Finals without a so-called superstar. Maybe they can just play team ball and play together and get that done as a team instead of finding a superstar. Let me know. Bye.